Hi everyone, I'm Serena Fazan and you are watching CEO 360. We are continuing our conversation with the CEO of Feeding Tampa Bay, Thomas Mance. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's an honor to be with you and be on your show. We appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, okay, I have goosebumps all over because we are in this amazing warehouse, one of many.
Yeah.
Tell us what we are looking at, Thomas.
So one of our objectives as an organization is to make sure people are healthy, right? We tend to talk about food more than we talk about health, but health is really what food creates. So we focus on getting something like this, which are really good potatoes. The families we serve typically would not buy these because they're more expensive. So one of the challenges that folks have is that less healthy food is less expensive. More healthy food, more expensive. So we work really hard at getting potatoes. And as you can see, we get them by the tractor trailer load. And so that's what you see in front of you. But of course, you're in a pretty big warehouse. And if you think about all the food that you see in this warehouse, the next one, and the one across the street, all that food rotates about every 2 weeks.
Well,
it moves that fast.
Well, it's wonderful. In the previous segments, you've been showing us on everything you accomplish and how many families that you feed. But this is CEO 360, Thomas Mance. So I must ask you, as we stand here and as you look around, what is going through your heart and mind, especially from a man coming from the public sector and joining the nonprofits?
You know, I've been thinking about this issue for a while, and one of the comments that's often made to me is that folks appreciate the opportunity to serve. What I've really come to believe is it's less about appreciating the opportunity than understanding the responsibility. So Serena, you would know this. None of us has ever gotten anywhere without help.
Absolutely.
Not one of us, no matter, I don't believe in our bootstraps. All of us need people around us. So I often have two reactions when I'm here. One is I'm profoundly grateful I get to do this, I get to serve in this way, and I feel really grateful for that. The other thing I think that this work always does is it reminds you when you see the size and scope of our work, there's two things you should think about is, wow, they're doing a lot of stuff. But number two is there's a lot of people that have needs. And so I tend to think about both of those, and part of the challenge of leadership is learning to hold both of those together because they're both true. And so the thing you wrestle with as a CEO is the pride of your accomplishments and the responsibility you have to do a good job against a real challenge in your community. So you always have to be really aware that both are there.
Well, there is no I in team, as we always say, right?
Correct.
So what, though, would you say, you talked about the challenge of the community, because we want to serve this community, but as a CEO, what do you feel your biggest challenge has been?
So I think good leadership challenges all of your strengths and weaknesses, right? So you tend to think about your job as a leader and thinking, I'm going to draw upon these strengths in order to be a better leader. But the reality is what is most challenging is your ability to understand your weaknesses and the things you have to get better at, things you have to learn, ways in which you need to grow. And I would say for someone like me, probably the greatest challenge in doing all of this is you have to become much more vulnerable to do this work. We can't think about it as dollars in and dollars out. We can't think about it as pounds in and pounds out. The calculus is we have a neighbor who is in need. How can we help another human being? And in order to do that, you have to be convinced of, convicted of, and committed to the idea that that's your responsibility. It's very different than, for-profit corporations have an important role in our community. But their role and goal ultimately is to return profits to shareholders and provide good services to the community. Our job is to make sure that the most vulnerable of us are taken care of. That's a responsibility you need to understand every single day, and you can't lose sight of.
Well, with your story, and we talked about it in segment one, it's compelling. You had a calling. You had a calling all those years ago. So for someone who's watching right now, what would you say to someone who has that calling?
Well, I think the challenge of that moment is the ability to be true to it. I don't think it's ever as clear as it feels in hindsight. I think as you're going through it, it's far more confusing to you. I heard someone say one time, a musician said, you know, I was growing into the particular shoes I was wearing at that time. And I think there's a lot of that as you, again, hindsight, it's a much clearer, easier story to understand and a narrative to tell. But when you're going through it, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of concern. You want to know that you're doing the right thing. We always have the battle of the head and the heart.
Yes.
And so there's always some competition there. And I think the challenge is discerning the difference between what you feel like is a calling on your life and the things you want to do differently. And for me, Serena, some of it was about, I knew that was no longer for me. I had done that, I had been successful in the corporate world, I had enjoyed the benefits of it, but I was convinced that that wasn't the right thing for me any longer. I think what was less clear was, how do you start your new path forward? What does that iteration look like? You know, how do you start to move into and morph into the person that you want to be? And there's a lot of steps where you probably have a sense of, I'm kind of trying to feel for walls here,
right.
As I'm trying to figure out what that looks like.
And the fear, so, right, the fear of even...
I think fear in a healthy sense. I think I've never been afraid to make a change. I think if there's one thing that I would say, you know, I moved as a youngster from Florida to New York City and took a big job. When I was in New York City, I went and I worked in Russia for 3 years in the 90s.
Wow.
Right? I've never been afraid of that. I think the difference here is that this was far more about me and what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be and how I could develop, hopefully, a greater consistency between who I was and what I was doing.
Well, as we look around the warehouse and as we show these amazing pictures of everything that you've accomplished, you've been in the nonprofit sector for 23 years, here at Feeding Tampa Bay.
10 years.
10 years. So everything that has already been accomplished, what's ahead for Feeding Tampa Bay?
I would answer it in a couple of different ways. When I got to Feeding Tampa Bay, we were providing about 10 million meals a year. Last year we provided 90 million meals.
90 million.
Right. But we're further behind today than we were when I got here 10 years ago. The need has grown that much. The challenges of our friends and neighbors have grown that much. And so for me, and I think any good leader, as you talk about what is our primary responsibility, it's always to be looking ahead, right? Our job is to say, how do we do the work that we're called to do more thoughtfully, effectively, efficiently? How do we call the community into that process? How do we get people excited about what we want to do? And so I think for me, the next iteration, the next phase of our world is we're moving into a new facility, but that facility is a foundation upon which we can build a much better community response to the problems that we're entrusted to solve. And so I think always good mission calls you forward. And that's what I feel like my responsibility is to help us continue to push our cause forward.
Describe to us the new facility. What is happening with the new facility?
It's a completely different view of how to do our work. You're standing in what is a very traditional food bank, right? And so you see a lot of food, you see trucks, warehouses, people going back and forth, forklifts, all of that. Our new facility will have all of that, but just as much space will be dedicated to humans. Because our objective really at the end of the day of all of this is to serve a person who walks into our care and says, I'm struggling, can you help? And our first answer to that's going to be, let's make sure you have good, healthy food. But our second and third and fourth answer has to be, how can we get you to other services you need? How can we connect you to the resources you're lacking? How do we help you build up your own ability to take care of yourself? So think about the new facility as a community center that has a food bank with it. And the view of that is we also want to collect all of our different partners in the community to our work. We'll have a medical center there. We'll have on-site restaurant, on-site grocery store. We'll have our friends from United Way or from Hillsborough County or from Homeless Services or Veteran Services. All of those folks will be with us in the new facility so that when someone walks in, we can say, just like we all want when we go into the community, right? It's the same thing you want when you want services.
Yes.
We want to make sure the neighbors we serve have the same viewpoint. And I think what we hope ultimately is that a good community center should call everyone together. So whether you're in a position where you haven't eaten in 2 days and you're coming in for a meal, we want you to feel welcome. Whether you're a millionaire that's donating money, we want you to feel welcome. Whether you're a volunteer coming into volunteer time, we want you to feel welcome. We want it to be a place where everybody belongs.
Well, I can honestly say this. This is the launch of CEO 360. You have talked to us so much within this past half hour on all the amazing things that you have done. CEO Thomas Mantz, it has been an honor to speak with you.
It's a pleasure.
An honor to launch this show. Thank you so much for watching.